experience. I strongly urge that, and it's not just because I'm a member of the union on the board, but I do think that working for union studios is a much better place to be than working for non-union. I've worked at both, and I can tell you the working conditions for the non-union studios, unless universally or not, is good on many levels. But, you know, sometimes you have to do what you need to do to get experience. And, you know, sometimes it happens. You might work a job and not get paid, or it might take a while to get the payment. I worked for MTV when I was in New York on Beavis and Butthead, and they were the worst. I think it took me 6 months to get paid dealing with the boards on the show, which was awful. But, you know, the only thing that I would say, Jody, is like if you have a friend who's somebody who's worked for them, especially, yeah, I think so, because today, a lot of times, if you Google something or look it up, a studio, you can almost guarantee if somebody got screwed over by a studio, there's going to be a rant about it from somebody, and you might find that if you look it up. And also, you should do some due diligence if you're working for a studio to see if they're a fly-by-night place or if they actually are legit. My wife is a CG animator. She worked at Rhythm & Hughes for over 10 years before they shut down. But prior to that, how she got her start was kind of working for video game companies. And there's enough of them out here that they're very abusive with some of the things that they do and some of the demands that they make. But it's a start. And, you know, and sometimes you have to kind of weigh whether the experience and contact is worth it or not. So, you know, those are all things to kind of consider and do your research and see if it's an EA has a horrible reputation. They used to anyway, for abusing the artists. Some studios don't. But you would think EA would be like a really fantastic place to work. They're huge. Bless you. But sometimes, you know, the bigger the studio doesn't always mean better. So, or they have enough lawyers to kind of put off paying you for a while. But, you know, being ripped off doesn't happen. In my career, I worked for one place, and it was a small studio, and the guy had a little bit of a chemical dependency problem with ran the studio, and I didn't get paid for about 3 weeks of work that I did, and I walked out. So, you know, it wasn't a big deal, but it was big enough. I mean, 3 weeks' salary can be a big deal for somebody if they're struggling to make rent. So, and plus, you know, it makes you pretty angry if you work 3 weeks of your life and didn't get paid for it. It kind of sucks. But I can say, though, that was the only experience, and I've been working out here since '96. And Rhythm & Hughes, my wife took a bath on her PTO. She had about 10 weeks or 12 weeks of vacation time that she lost when she went bankrupt. But that's an extreme case. You know, those don't always happen. But you should be aware of who you work for. Yeah, absolutely. So, that is that does kind of lead to another thing. Whenever you're taking work, if you're taking freelance work, you should always ask how much, because some studios will try to get you to do a lot more work than what they're paying you to do. For example, a friend of mine is another person who gave me a little bit of advice here, so let's see if I can find it out. Yeah, he said, I had a small freelance project that I agreed to last year. He's a background designer. He said, 3 to 5 BGs a week for 3 weeks. It ended up being 103 backgrounds in 3 weeks. Explain mission creep, I don't know what he means by that, and unrealistic expectations. Sometimes you'll work for somebody, and the smaller the studio, usually the more unrealistic it is. And they'll give you pie in the sky, and they'll tell you, oh, it's, you know, we only need this amount of work. And it ends up being double. But don't be afraid to tell them that's too much work, and I can't, you know, for what you're paying me. So don't be afraid of that, because they're not going to be afraid to tell you where's the work and come and get you when the stuff's not turned in on time. And they won't be afraid to badmouth you if you blow a deadline for them. So you should be realistic and not be afraid to ask those kinds of questions about the work for anything. And it doesn't just backgrounds, it's anything. If it seems like it's an unrealistic deadline, you know, I think you have a right as an artist to say, that seems to be a little, you know, can I have a little more time to do this, or a little more money?
We should ask that when you first sign a contract.
When you're negotiating, when you're talking to them, you should ask them up front. Especially, I mean, since we're talking about freelance work, it's piecemeal, and most times you're going to get paid for, you know, like I said, for storyboards, like a script page to break it down. I'll use that as an example. A script page could be a really, you know, you could get a script page and it could take you a week to do. Or you could get one page of script and it could take you 3 weeks to do, depending on what's there. Because you can get a thing that says all the armies of the world collide in the most epic battle of all time. And you know, that can be one sentence that could take you a week to do. And, you know, and it happens. People will take, and I'm sure that applies across the board with how much, my wife is working right now with John Hughes, and they're developing animation for what game, for like Jurassic Park, the ride, or whatever, you know, what is it called? Well, kind of the VR stuff. Yeah, it's the, I forget the device that she has. But
the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, so, you know, they're developing that stuff, and the demands are outrageous. It's outrageous what they expect the artists to pull off in a short amount of time. And they pay very little for some, and this is all, some of this stuff is overseas. My wife oversees a lot of the overseas animation. And, you know, the expectations are unrealistic a lot of times, and you have to basically say, no, we can't do it in this amount of time, we need more money, because inevitably that's what happens anyway. You know, they want to play name that tune with, oh, we can do this in 2 weeks, but if it's going to take you 2 months to do, it's going to take you 2 months to do. I don't care what anybody says. Like, you can turn something in, but it's not going to be acceptable quality in 2 weeks if it's going to take you 2 months. So you, as artists, you have to look out for you. You have to look out for your best interests, and you have to be able to realize what's possible and what is impossible, because it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of sleepless nights, it's a lot of your weekends, and you know, you may find yourself saying, my God, I've taken on way more than I can chew, and you don't want to fall into that kind of situation. Any other questions? I'll start with you.
Yeah. So when you're negotiating, like, I was talking to someone, he said, how much do you want to get paid? I'm like, oh God, that's a trick question.
It's a horrible question.
It's a very, very...
Tell them $1 million. Tell them $1 million bucks. You know, it is. They do it to everybody. They do it with us too. It's become, because they put it on you, and it makes the artist, because they know that most artists are uninformed and just want to work. And let's face it, most of us, it's a passion. You'd almost do it for free if you could. And that's what gets preyed on a lot of times. So what you have to do is you have to, like I said, go to the wage survey for the union and take a look at it, see what people make. Then you can make an informed decision about how much what you feel is fair. And you should never underestimate your abilities or what your worth is, because, you know, you're worth something. It's not like you're, I like to think we're almost like professional athletes. There's very few people, the work we do generates billions of dollars, trillions of dollars overall for studios. And we see a very small amount of that. And I think that artists need to understand, especially artists coming out of school, that your work is valuable. And you're just like a baseball player that steps up to the plate for, you know, the Dodgers. You go up there, if you're a 300 hitter, you can, you know, a power hitter, you're worth a lot of money. And that equates to, if you're a really good artist, really creative, you meet your deadlines, you're the equivalent of that, in my opinion. And I think that, you know, it's, a lot of young artists tend to get abused because they're being told you know, oh, well, what, you know, you're new. What do you mean you're not worth that? You are. So you just need to kind of look things up, figure out a price that's acceptable to you, and don't waver from that. You know, because you're going to be the one miserable if you take a job for a lot less than you feel it is worth. You know, at the time you may be like, well, I'll take it because it is, but when you're in the middle of it and you're working around the clock and maybe your second night without any sleep to get something done, you're going to regret that decision. So, and if you're getting paid a little bit more, you might not feel quite as bad.
Well, schools already done that to me, and I paid them to do that to me.
Well, you know, you just want to be, you know, it is a catch-22. You need to get the experience, and you want to get it any way you can. And the reality is you're going to probably end up taking a lot less, let's hope, than in some ways, than what you're going to be making 20 years from now. So, you know, you got to start somewhere. But at the same time, you don't want to screw yourself out of what you're worth. So that would be my advice, to look at, you know, if you want an informed decision, there's a place you can go to find out how much people make, and then you can kind of make the determination as to whether the amount that somebody, when they ask you that question, you can say, I want to get paid X thousands of dollars for the job. And you can say it with a straight face and not you know, waver. Because they're always going to come back and say, well, that's too much, that's crazy. So then you can come back and say, well, you know, then you can negotiate. And you can sit down and negotiate a price. And it's something hopefully you can live with. All right, who's next?
Going into the field, what should I know about what I'm going to be doing?
Everything. Well, what do you mean? What do you want to do?
Well, thinking like how to start, I guess is what I'm asking for. Like, should I like maybe go for an internship and learn how like some of this stuff?
Sure. That's not a bad thing to do. You know, one of the girls that I work with at Marvel is one of our interns. Well, she started out as an intern. She's actually a coordinator now. And what she told me, her advice was, there is no bad intern job. You know, people will say, well, it's not exactly what I want to do. You know, there's only a spot available in accounting, but I want to be an animator. Well, you know, if you can get into the business, you can always make your contacts and kind of go around and you know, be good at what you do as an intern, but that's a good way to get your foot in the door. And once your foot is in the door, that's where you start to make contacts. That's where you want to be. You want to get to know people and get to know who they are, and then you can talk to the people who hire for animation and get to know those people. So you get to see the business from the inside out. So absolutely, being an intern is a wonderful way to kind of break in. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of people who are done very well for themselves, and they started out as interns. But in terms of knowing everything, do you mean the inner workings of a business, or do you mean you're the...
I'm thinking more along the lines of inner workings of the business.
Okay. Then I would say that's one way of doing it. I mean, you're never going to learn, you know, every studio is different. So whoever you want to work for, there's a constant, and that's being professional and carrying yourself so people like you, and you know, and not being difficult to work with and all that kind of stuff. But you learn what a company is like by being there and doing the work. So, but you know, if you want to learn your craft, you know, you have to just keep working at it and keep studying and getting better and better, and really focus on know what your weaknesses are and work to make them strengths, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Anybody else?
If we're already doing freelance work and we're transitioning into full-time work, is there anything that we should know before that process happens, before that like changeover, like in terms of like benefits, or like what's going to happen when you're working full-time?
Well, sure. I mean, you should know what if you're, you know, there's a big difference usually between freelance and in-house. you know, it's like Marvel pays $700 a week, or $700 a page for script, or 600, 600 to 700. Usually people will maybe get 6 or 7, well, I'd say 4 to 6 pages of script. So, you know, it's what, $2,400 for 4 weeks worth of work. If you're in-house, you're getting paid that almost, or making that amount every week to do the same work. So I would say it's preferable to be in-house if possible. So yeah, you know, and also another thing that people aren't aware of, even for union studios, and it's something that we're trying to get out of this next contract coming up for animation, freelancers get screwed with their health benefits a lot of times. For the union, this is, every union shop, they can pull this. If you're doing 40 hours worth of work, and this is for Disney, for Nickelodeon, for any of the DreamWorks, for any of the studios, they are going by what they call standard minimum in the contract. They know they can't get away with paying you a substandard salary because it's really low, and nobody will work for them for that. But what they do, and I think this is lousy, is they don't tell the artist this, but if you're doing a 40-hour-a-week gig, they basically your health, you have to bank your hours for the union. Every 400 hours you qualify for your health care. And I know you're in school and that may not be a big deal right now, but at some point in your life it will be. What they're doing is they're taking, instead of getting 40 hours, they're giving you 8. So every hour basically equates to, I think, $10. So if they're only giving, you know, you're losing about 3,200, or about, what is it, 3,200, or, you know, or you know, it's a lot. It's a substantial amount of money that they're ripping the artist off by doing that. And they get away with it all the time because they don't tell anybody about it. So nobody asks, nobody thinks to ask that as a question. You just assume that they're doing the right thing, and they're not. So yeah, you definitely should ask what benefits you're getting. And, you know, if you go into a union studio, if you're working for a union studio, there are certain things they have to do, that they have to look out. It's to protect us. That's why it's there, is to protect the artist. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Are there any tips or suggestions during the negotiation process that are good to keep in mind, aside from confidence or
Yeah, you don't want to
contact?
be. Well, you don't want to be overconfident. You don't want to be. You don't want to be. You don't want to be in there and be arrogant. Like that's never good. That always comes across badly. You know, you're there to do business, but you should keep it business. You know, it's the only tip that I would say is don't undervalue yourself. And studios tend to put you on the spot. You're in a room, like Jody said. They ask you, how much money do you want? Like, what are your salary demands? Most people, it's amazing how ill prepared they are to answer that question. And if you lowball, they're still going to come back at you and say, you know, they're still going to say, oh, I don't know if I can pay that amount. I'll see what I can do for you, you know. And then they come back and let's put it this way. Here's a piece of advice. They say, how much do you want to make? What do you think you're worth? And you give them an amount, and they go, okay, you probably screwed yourself. So, because they're never going to, most of the time, it's a negotiation process. And sometimes they'll tell you what you're going to make. They're going to, you know, they'll say, this is what the job is, this is what it offers, and it's basically take it or leave it. And, you know, you can try to negotiate, you know, that's fine, but a lot of times, especially for the bigger studios, they kind of have a set amount in mind for what they pay people. So, and it's usually pretty fair. So it's not something you're going to, you know, you'll find as your career progresses that that's usually the case. You'll find you're not going to get ripped off as much. It's usually when you get out in the beginning is where you get preyed on the most. So, you know, that's where you can, if you're not careful, get screwed over. Does that help?
Yeah, but are there any other questions like the one that Jody mentioned where they'll put you on the spot?
Well, you know, again, if you're negotiating, not really, but it's up to you to ask questions at times, like how much work it is. You know, some guys will just take the work and they'll take the job because it's a job. And they don't realize, like I said, my friend said, you know, that he was told something was going to be 3 to 5 backgrounds, which is doable. It ended up being 103, you know, for in a 3-week period instead of 15 or whatever he was told. So it was almost 10 times the amount. That's a lot of work, and you're not getting paid any extra for that. So you should be very aware of how much work they're asking you to do, and I think it's a fair question to ask. What's the schedule? What's, depending on what, like, you know, for example, what do you want to do? What are you looking to do for a job in the business? Do you want to be an animator? Yeah. So, you know, you're going to get paid for maybe the amount of footage that you turn in or what you do. You want to ask what the rate is for that. You want to find out how much you're going to get. It's not an unfair question to ask, and it's also not unfair to ask what the deadline is. I mean, they'll give it to you anyway. They're going to tell you what the deadline is. But, you know, if maybe a question that you would ask is, if this runs over, are you going to pay me? I expect to be paid more for the amount of footage or work that I'm turning in. How many revisions you're going to do, how many passes, because that can become a real issue if you're, you know, that's something to negotiate. Like, look, I'll do a pass, you know, because sometimes I'll come back to you 20 times before something is done. That's ridiculous, because you don't get paid any extra to handle that, to leave that stuff. So I think it's fair to say how many, you know, to negotiate that as well with what you're doing.
But the nature of my question was, what are some questions that they would ask you?
What would they ask you? Yeah, usually that's a biggie. The biggie is salary. That's all they, you know, that's pretty much it. Other than that, they'll dictate the terms to you as to what, usually they'll tell you what you're, you know, going to get and what they're going to do. So it's up to you to protect yourself and ask the questions back and not be afraid to ask them, because the more vague they are with you, the more it benefits them. So they're not going to ask you a ton of specific questions. They're not going to say, what's your shoe size, you know? They can see what you can do, you know, based on reputation, portfolio, you know, your real whatever. So they don't need to ask, they've made the decision to hire you. You know, when you're in that room negotiating, their only main question is how much money are we going to have to pay you? So it's up to you to protect yourself and ask the questions. You need, the other way around, you need to ask those specific things to say, how many passes, you know, do you expect me to do? And, you know, and be able to ask that in a professional manner, but still, I think it's a fair question. Or if you don't like the, you know, if they ask you for a salary amount, you'll find out they're going to tell you, oh, it's a lot, I don't know if I can do that. So you'll probably end up having to negotiate. Whatever amount you give them is going to be too high. Let's put it that way. So I've never been in a situation where I've negotiated and I've given them a price when I've been asked that question, and they've ever said, oh, that's fantastic, that's great, we'll give it to you right away. And actually I wouldn't want them to, because I feel like I was a real dope if I was that. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny you mentioned that, because we had a workshop a few weeks back. His name was Jose July, and he said a story that was exactly like that.
Yeah.
For Disney, he gave them a price that he wanted to pay, and they said, fabulous.
And you felt like an idiot right after that. You felt, yeah. You do, because it's like immediately you're like, oh my God, like I should have went higher, you know. So, it's business. That's how you have to look at it. It's business, and you have to protect yourself. In any job you take, like if you're going to end up doing more work, you should ask to be paid for that work before you do the work. Before you do anything, if you know that, hey, this is way more than what we agreed to, you need to tell them that, because that's when you have the power. When you do the work and you give it to them, done the work, you know, they'll take the stuff and use it, and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll take care of it, you know. But that's where you get ripped off. It's beforehand. That's when you can say, look, this is a lot more than what we agreed to. I need to be paid for it. And then you can kind of tell them, come to some kind of a, hopefully, resolution. you know, monetarily that you deserve. But yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. It's part of the business, you know. They're there to make money too, so and they make a lot of it. We have to protect ourselves. Yeah.
Hi, I suppose this is a bit more of a personal question.
Sure.
But I was curious, it seems like every single storyboard artist I've come across, both in studio and out of studio, have become very, I don't want to say this negatively, but cynical, maybe?
Cynical.
Yeah, just about the industry in general. I was wondering, is that a trend that's been going on just for that field?
No, I think that, you know, it's like any profession. If you work for anything and you're in it for a long time, you're going to see good and bad. And it's like anything. You're going to have complaints about, no job is going to be like, you know, when I tell people that I work for Marvel. They think they think that we're running around with capes on and, shooting, bows and arrows at each other. And, it's hard work. And it's that way in anything. And, you can go work for Walmart and it'd be the same. You're going to have the same things in certain ways, certain experiences. You're going to feel at times that the work is a lot. You're not being maybe paid what you think you should be paid. Or you feel that the deadlines are too tight for the amount of work that you have. But I mean, overall, in my career, I think I've had a very good career, and I think I've been paid very well for the things that I do. And I'm grateful for my career. I think if you don't want to be in it, get out. If you're that jaded and that cynical about it, and you hate it that much, then you should get the hell out of it because it's too hard to work. Go sell real estate or something. Put your money into that, you'll make a lot more. So. I don't know. I personally, there's good and bad. I mean, there's studios that I've hated working for, but overall, I think I've had a pretty good career. So I'm happy. I don't know. You tell me 20 years from now when you're working. It's part of, like I said, it's anything. You're going to get up there and you're going to have some good and bad. So, but mostly you hope the good outweighs the bad. If you do what you love, which I do. I mean, I was, this 5-year-old kid, I wanted to draw superheroes, and I get a chance to do that. I get a chance to get paid money for that, have a career. I remember I had a guidance counselor when I was in high school that said to me, well, what are you going to, why don't you be an engineer? Why don't you focus on being an engineer? Because where are you ever going to make money and have a career drawing superheroes or drawing comic books or comic strips or whatever? I didn't know. It was like, I don't know, but that's what I want to do. So I went out and did it. And that's what I tell anybody. It's like, find what you'd like to do, work at it, study it, and you'll find it'll come to you. I tell my kids that. I don't care if they're a garbage collector. If you really love what you're doing, then be the best you can be at that, and the money will probably follow you. And money isn't everything. It's also being happy and enjoying, and feeling fulfilled with the job that you do. So, is it perfect? No, but I don't think it's a perfect world. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So other than people missing deadlines, how else do people commonly mess up?
Screw up.
Yeah.
They screw up by being jerks, by being arrogant, by not taking direction well, by being difficult to work with. I mean, I don't know if I'm sure, you've experienced some of, I'm sure there's a classmate or there's somebody who, they may not be the easiest person to get along with. And the workplace is no different. You have people who sometimes feel a little more entitled than they should be. And sometimes they get a little egotistical, too much so for their own good. They don't want to work as hard. They don't want to, some of the things that people do, they'll come in and try to not work as hard. And you have people sitting there who are killing themselves, and they see somebody who constantly is coming in late and leaving early. And they hate that. So that's one thing. They're jerks to work with. They're not easy to get along with. They're abrasive personalities. That's a good way to kill your career because nobody wants to work with, jerks. So, those are ways, being unprofessional in your work, late, being, those are the biggies. I mean, being, personality and being punctual with your work and on time are probably the two biggest killers. Those are probably the two biggest things that people do. Aside from that, I think for the most part, if you can meet those two, I think you're okay. Right? So I can't think of anything else that's major people do. They're not going to fire you if you pick your nose. That's pretty much it. Those are the biggies. And I mean, that goes a long way, being egotistical and abrasive, there's a lot of abuses that go with that. So, and I mean, you do have guys in the business who prey on, it's not, unfortunately, there's some deviant guys out there that, there's occasionally sexual harassment, there's things like that, and those guys hopefully get kicked out of the industry. But for the most part, it's a pretty decent group of people. So I find it usually they're great people to work with. Usually have integrity, most of them. If you have that, I think you can go pretty far. If you're somebody who sticks, who says what they're going to do and does it, I think that goes a long way. It carries probably. So.
If your supervisors are the ones that are like very abrasive personalities, like, do you just grin and bear it in that situation?
No, you should never grin and bear it. No, that's absolutely not. You should definitely, I mean, I know.
It's difficult to say, hey.
I know. It is. It's, there's, most studios have HR departments, and if you work for bigger studios, that's why they're there. And, there's some people that are supervisors that are arrogant or very difficult to work with on many different levels. From just being a jerk to work for to sexually harassing people. And I think the worst thing that anybody can do is take the abuse and just kind of walk away, because if they're doing it to you, they're going to do it to somebody else. And I think it's up to that person sometimes to protect other people as well and step forward, but it's not